Yesterday, Sayadaw explained that by traveling with Loki Samatha jhana, by traveling with Samatha vehicle, one can attain mundane kind of jhana, Rupa jhana, the fine material jhana, and Arupa jhana, immaterial jhana. In the jhana, there is jnana, knowledge associating with the jhana, and also there are jhana factors such as vitakka and vichara present in the jhana. These jhana factors have their own functions. Vitakka applies the mind onto the object, and vichara sustains application of the mind onto the object so that the noting mind will be bonded with the object. And these jhana factors coexist in the jhana consciousness, and they are associated mental states with the jhana. And because of vitakka, the noting mind is fixed on the object of meditation, and vichara makes the noting mind rubbed onto the object so that the noting is effective. So these are the qualities of these jhana factors. So when these jhana factors of vitakka and vichara are present, when they are strong, other jhana factors are also present, such as piti, joy and rapture, and also happiness, both in the mind and the body, which is called sukha. Piti is joy, rapture or satisfaction, and sukha is the happiness and well-being. And also there is another jhana factor, ekaggata, which is another name for samadhi, concentration. It is one-pointedness of the mind. And when these jhana factors are becoming strong, the meaning of jhana will be more obvious. And there is knowledge associating with this jhana. The knowledge associating with this jhana is called jhana sammaditthi. And yesterday, Sayadaw explained that in order to develop Vipassana Sammaditthi, one has to travel using Samadhi vehicle. Making use of this Samadhi vehicle, concentration vehicle, one can attain knowledge, and this Vipassana knowledge can also be called Vipassana Sammaditthi. Vipassana Sammaditthi is the knowledge, knowing the sabhava, knowing the unique characteristics of the nama-rupa phenomena which are arising as cause and effect. And Vipassana Sammaditthi also knows the various modes of impermanent suffering and non-self. Vipassana knows in various modes of these three characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self, and it is called Vipassana Sammaditthi. So yesterday, Sayadaw explained that one should build up Samadhi jhana, Samadhi vehicle, in order to attain Vipassana Sammaditthi. And today, Sayadaw will explain how this Vipassana vehicle can be built from both theoretical and practical aspects. Among the two kinds of jhana, one of them is Vipassana jhana. And when explaining about Vipassana jhana, one cannot do so without explaining on the factors of Vitakka and Vichara. So today Sayadaw will explain theory as well as the practice, and Sayadaw will explain what kind of benefits will be obtained by combining theory and practice. In order to attain jhana Sammaditthi, one has to practice samatha jhana. And practicing samatha jhana is observing viññati concept that does not really exist. And Vipassana jhana is observing on the nama rupa that really exists, the nama rupa that are arising as cause and effect that really exist. So the difference between these two is that samatha jhana contemplates on concept which does not really exist, whereas Vipassana jhana contemplates on nama rupa phenomena that really exist, so that one comes to know the characteristics of impermanent, suffering, and non-self. Practicing Vipassana is observing things that really exist in the way they really are. So this is the difference. Practicing samatha, one has to concentrate, one has to fix the mind onto single object of meditation in order to keep the mind calm and tranquil. When practicing Vipassana, one has to observe any one of the four kinds of objects that is arising at the present moment. Any one of these four objects, kaya, the bodily object, and vedana, feelings, citta, mind, and the Dhamma, any one of these four objects that is arising at the present moment should be observed. And there is a saying, Bhutan Bhutato Pasati. One should observe the object that is existing, that really exists, in the way the object really is. Bhuta means things that exist, things that arise due to relevant causes. It is called Bhuta. Things that arise due to relevant cause, which really exist, is called Bhuta. And for example, there is the material phenomena such as rising and falling of the abdomen. Rising and falling of the abdomen, such as stiffness, tension, movement, they are arising due to relevant cause. They are not causeless. Rising, falling is caused by breathing in and breathing out. And because one wants to breathe in, one actually breathes in and the rising occurs. Because one wants to breathe out, the actual breathing out takes place and falling arises. So this rising, falling is connecting with breathing in and breathing out. And this breathing in and breathing out is caused by the intention to breathe in and breathe out. So things that are happening due to relevant cause is called Bhuta. And these Bhuta are things that really exist. And they are also Paramattha, they are ultimate truth. they are not imaginary, but they are ultimate truth that really exist and that can be really observed. And Buddha is also explained as Vipassana. Vipassana means that really exists. And one has to observe on Buddha that really exists. And how should we observe them? We should observe in the way they really are. So it's said Buddha-to. We should observe these objects in the way they really are. If there is rising of the abdomen, we should observe it as rising and not falling. When the falling takes place, we've got to observe it as falling and not rising. And when there is hardness, we observe it as hardness and not softness. And also when there is flowing, we note it as flowing. When there is heat, we observe it as heat. When there is warmth, we observe it as warmth. When it is cold, we observe it as cold. When it is light, we observe it as light. And when there is stiffness, we observe it as stiff. And when there is tension, we observe it as tense. When there is movement, we observe it as moving. And also the same goes with seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and so on. So we should observe these objects in the way they really are. And it is said that Buddham Buddhato Pasati, we need to observe the objects in the way they really exist, in the way they really are. When we are observing these objects, there are jhana factors involved. We say we observe. There is only one word we say. We say we observe, but actually there are many factors involved in observing, and there are many mental strengths involved in observing. And when we are observing over and over again, these mental factors, they become stronger and stronger. They have their each own qualities. And when we combine these mental strengths together, we come to know the Nama-rupa distinctly. We come to know cause and effect, and we come to know that these objects arise and pass away. And we will see that all objects give rise to new. When we see the arising and passing away of the objects, Vipassana jnana, insight knowledge, will be developed. So one has to practice so that one will develop Vipassana jnana, seeing the arising and passing away of the objects. In order to develop Vipassana jnana, one needs to observe the object in the way it really is, Buddhato Pasati. And Buddhato is explained as Yatha Sabhavato. Yatha Sabhavato means how they manifest, in the nature, how they manifest. And it is said that Salakhanato means in the way their characteristic is. There is Sabhava Lakhana, unique or individual characteristic. In Prithvi, earth element, the characteristic of hardness, softness can be seen. And in Apo, water element, there is cohesion, flowing, fluidity. And in Tejo Dhatu, in heat element, there is heat, warmth, cold, lightness. And in Vayo Dhatu, wind element, there is stiffness, tension, movement. So such characteristics are their unique or individual characteristics. And all the Nama-rupa phenomena have common characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self, and it is called Samanya Lakhana, common or universal characteristic of impermanent suffering and non-self. So one needs to discern Samanya Lakhana, the characteristic of impermanent suffering and non-self. And in order to discern the Samanya Lakhana, one needs to be mindful. In the whole body is a big field of objects to be noted. And among these big field of objects to be noted, there is the presently arising object, which has to be noted. At times, there may be bodily action that manifests, and one has to note and observe this bodily action. At times, feelings may be obvious, and this obvious feeling should be noted and observed. At times, there may be the mind that is more obvious. One should note them. And at times, there may be seeing, hearing that is obvious, and one should note these seeing and hearing. At the beginning of the practice, yogi may not be able to follow everything, so one has to start from few objects, and one has to, when one is doing sitting meditation, one should focus one's attention on the rising and falling of the abdomen. And this rising and falling of the abdomen is the primary object during sitting meditation. When one is doing walking meditation, one has to keep one's attention on the foot, and one has to be mindful every time one takes a step. So one should be mindful every time one lifts the foot. One should be mindful every time one moves the foot. One should be mindful every time one should be noticed, and one should be applying these jhanic factors in order to be noting the presently arising object. And when noting, Samadhi Khanda or concentration group is involved, and today's Sayadaw will explain how to build up Samadhi jhana, samatha vehicle from both theoretical and practical aspects. One has to be mindful every time one does bodily action, every time one sees, hears, smells, tastes and touch, one should be observing. So in every object, the bodily action, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, as well as opening, closing of the eyes, blinking, each of these objects have their own nature, have their own characteristics, and they are called sabhava. Sa means one's own individual, or in another way, sa can mean common. So in these objects, there are unique individual characteristics and also common characteristics. Each of their objects has their own unique characteristics, which are different from other objects. And also, these objects, they have their common characteristics common to them. Even though they may be different objects, they have common characteristics also. So bhava means things that is existing, that is obvious, that manifests. And it is said that bhavati upavitati bhava, the thing that is existing, arising, occurring, that manifests and that is obvious is called bhava. And sako bhava, sabhava, the unique or individual characteristic that is really existing is called Sabhava. For example, Prithvi, the earth element, has its own unique characteristic of hardness, softness. It is its own sign or it is its own characteristic, it is its own nature. Apo has fluidity, cohesion, and it is its own unique characteristic or nature. And the mind has its own unique characteristic, of cognizing the object. Vedana, feeling, has its own unique characteristics of feeling. And such unique characteristics are called Sabhava. They are the unique individual characteristics that really exist. And these objects, they arise, they do not stay the same, but they pass away. They arise and pass away. Prithvi Dhatu, earth element, arises and passes away. It arrives at one moment and passes away at another. And also Apo Dhatu, it arises and passes away. Everything that arises passes away. Stiffness, tension, warmth, cold, heat arises at one moment and passes away at another moment. And also seeing arises and passes away. Hearing arises and passes away. So this arising and passing away is the common characteristic which is common to all objects. They arise and pass away. Because these objects arise and pass away, they are impermanent, and it is suffering because beings are constantly tormented by arising and passing away. And these objects, there is no atta or self involved. They are happening in their own accord, and thus these objects are non-self. And when things arise and pass away, when things arises and dissolve, they cannot be taken as good because they are not permanent. They pass away, they dissolve after arising. And these are not done by any creator. There is no self involved, and they are not permanent. They are suffering, and it's non-self. There is no atta, self involved. Things are happening in their own accord, and it is called anatta. So whatever object that arises, they are impermanent, suffering, and non-self. And these characteristics of impermanent, suffering, and non-self are common to all objects. Every object, everything apart from Nibbana has these common characteristics of impermanent, suffering, and non-self. It is called Samano Bhavo Sabhavo. The characteristics of impermanent, suffering, non-self are common to all objects, and thus these common characteristics are called Sabhava. So Yatha Sabhavato, one should observe things in the way they really exist, in their unique characteristics as well as common characteristics. Saraji explains by giving an example. When you have a plate of meal, there are many chunks of food on your plate. And when you pick up a chunk of food, put it in your mouth and chew it, you will know the flavor or the taste. When the flavor of the chunk of food is sweet, if one chews it, one will get the sweet taste. And when the food is sour, when one chews properly, one will get the sour flavor. So by putting in the mouth, chewing properly, one will know the taste of the food. Just as the food has its own flavor, in the same way, the sabhava, the things, objects, have their own characteristics which are compared to the flavor of the food. And when eating, one should chew properly until the food is digested, so that until the food is grinded properly, only then one will know the flavor. In the same way, when objects arise, one should observe them carefully so that one knows the nature or characteristics, just as when one knows the flavor by chewing. Just as when one chews the food, the flavor will be known. In the same way, when one observes the object carefully, one will know the nature or characteristics of that object. In eating, when one chews the food, the sweet flavor, the sour flavor will come out. It wouldn't stay the same. The sweet, sour flavor will pass away. So the sweet, sour flavor does not last long. It will eventually go away. In the same way, the sabhava, these objects, they have their unique characteristics, and all, such as stiffness, tension, and these characteristics, stiffness, tension, they don't stay the same. They arise and pass away. So every object, every bodily action, every object, they arise and pass away, and this arising and passing away is the common characteristic that is common to all objects. So one should be observing so that one comes to know the samanya lakkhana, the common characteristic of arising and passing away. When eating the food, one will not know the taste just by knowing the shape or form of the food or the manner how it is. So when one chews the food, one will know the taste, and it is not the form or shape or the manner that one can eat, but it is the flavor that one will get when eating. So the flavor is in the food that appears in many shapes and manner. So when one eats, the flavor will be known. In the same way, when one is noting rising and falling of the abdomen, one may know form or shape of the abdomen. Knowing form or shape of the abdomen, one cannot say one knows the nature. And at times, when noting rising, falling, the manner of movement, manner of rising, falling may be known, but it is not knowing the true nature. What one has to know is the true nature that is beyond form or shape or manner. It is important to know the true nature, the true characteristic when noting the object, the nature, the characteristic that really exists. In the body, there is Prithvi Dhatu, earth element. Earth element manifests in head hair, body hair, toenails, fingernails, teeth, flesh, bone, and so on. When you feel the bone, you can feel the hardness. when you feel the flesh, you can feel softness. There is different type of Paṭhavi Dhātu. The Paṭhavi Dhātu that is hard, that has hardness as its characteristic, and the Paṭhavi Dhātu that has softness as its characteristic. And also, there is the tear, sweat, moisture. It is Vayo Dhātu. So, wetness, stickiness is the characteristic of Vayo Dhātu. And at times, one feels warmth, heat, cold, lightness. It is Tejo Dhātu. And at times, one experiences stiffness, tension, movement. It is Vayo Dhātu. There are 6 kinds of wind. 6 kinds of wind in the body. The wind that permeates on the upper part of the body. The wind that flows in lower part of the body. The wind that flows in the intestine. The wind that goes up to the upper body. The wind that flows on the lower part of the body. The wind that is going in the intestine. The wind that is going inside the stomach, outside of the intestine. The wind that is the wind that is involved in breathing in and breathing out, and the wind which flows in the whole body. So in the body, these 6 kinds of wind are involved. And when one is practicing, one should observe so that the true characteristic will be known. It is not just enough to know the form or the shape or the manner, but actually people's mind usually rest on form and shape, and at the beginning of the practice this cannot be overcome. At the beginning one will be knowing just form or shape or the manner, but as the samadhi, concentration, and jnana, knowledge is developed, one will know the true nature, the true characteristic that is beyond form, shape, or the manner. At the beginning of the practice, when viriya, sati, samadhi, when effort, mindfulness, and concentration is not as strong yet, yogi should be noting the object, naming, labeling the object. One should be observing, one should be noting with the labels such as rising, falling, sitting, touching, lifting, moving, placing, bending, stretching. So one should be observing with these labels in the way they are. And one should note by using labels at the beginning of the practice. So these labels or the name concept are called Tacca Paññatti. One should name them, label them accordingly so that it will be different from each other. And tomorrow Sayadaw will explain why one needs to note using labels, and Sayadaw will continue to explain tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.